every subject that you need to learn has a core idea. And once you've understood what that core idea is, then everything else that you learn adds to your expertise and makes sense because it fits into that overall big idea. Well, the big idea, the core idea in accelerated learning is that everyone has a personal learning style, a way of learning that suits them best. And once you've found the learning tools, the strategies, if you like, that match that personal learning style, well, you'll be learning in ways that suit your particular brain. And because it's therefore more natural, it's more comfortable, and it's easier. And because it's easier, it's quicker. Hence the name accelerated learning. Well, this video will give you dozens of ideas to learn better and faster. Try them, pick the ones that suit you best, and you'll have a set of learning tools that's custom-made for your brain. But why would you want to become a faster learner? I think there are 5 reasons. First, knowledge is doubling every 2 or 3 years. There's more to read, there's more to know. What you know today, unfortunately, won't buy you success tomorrow. Secondly, the average person now leaving college can expect 5 careers in a lifetime. That's not jobs, that's careers. Thirdly, nobody today can guarantee their employment. But what you can do is you can guarantee your employability, which comes from constantly expanding your skills and simply learning faster than your competitors. Fourthly, we're in the era of mind power, not manpower. To earn more, you have to learn more. And fifthly, technology is the driving force today, and of course it's changing faster and faster. It's all summed up in one word: change. The constant upgrading of your skills, lifelong learning, is the minimum threshold to stay competitive today. And in such a fast-changing world, learning how to learn surely has to be the core skill, because what you learn can, in fact, will become out of date. How to learn, well, that's a skill for life. And that's incidentally why I really hope that you'll share the techniques on this video with your children. Let me spend a few moments talking about your brain, because that's, of course, what you learn with. 90% of what we now know about the human brain has been discovered in the last 20 years, and accelerated learning is based upon those important new discoveries. Accelerated learning, as you'll see, consciously starts with the big picture because that suits the faster, global, learning right side of the brain. But then it presents information logically to suit the more linear left side of the brain. Here's one of the most fascinating of the new discoveries. There's a middle part of the brain which is a key to your learning. This middle brain controls your emotions, your immune system, a lot of the long-term memory, and it acts rather like a filter. Now, information coming into your brain from your senses passes through this middle brain. But if you're under stress, well, that information may not get released properly to the top thinking brain. The final information you need on your brain is that the idea of a single fixed form of intelligence, which you can measure as an IQ, has, I'm pleased to say, been discredited. In its place, Dr. Howard Gardner, who's professor of education at Harvard University, has shown that we have at least seven different forms of intelligence, and maybe an 8th. Each of those intelligences represents a resource for learning. You have a linguistic intelligence, the ability to absorb and use the written and spoken word. A mathematical logical intelligence, the ability to handle numbers and sequences and logically presented data. There's a visual spatial intelligence. You use this in navigation, in drawing, sculpture, diagrams. There's a physical intelligence, the ability to use your body well. Interpersonal, the ability to communicate well, to read other people's moods and body language sensitively. There's an intrapersonal intelligence. That's an inner-directed intelligence, the ability to be reflective, to make plans, to draw conclusions. And finally, a musical intelligence, the ability to use rhythm and rhyme well. Now, the result of all our research on learning and the brain has led us to see that effective learning follows 6 stages. Let me go over them briefly. Stage 1, your state of mind. You need to be relaxed, motivated and focused. In other words, to mobilize that middle brain. Stage 2, whatever you're learning, it involves fresh information coming into your brain from the outside. So learning involves seeing and hearing and doing. And the more sharply your senses are focused on the subject, the better you will learn. Stage 3, you've now taken in the information. Well, now you need to actively explore the subject to make it your own. And that's when you'll use as many of your intelligences as possible. Stage 4, having understood the subject, you still need to commit it to memory in such a way that a simple trigger will cause the rest of the information to come flooding back. Stage 5, you now need to know, if you do know, to test yourself. In other words, do I really know this? And finally, stage 6, you need to reflect upon the whole process. In other words, to think back on which techniques really worked well for you and which ones might need to be modified. You see, you're now thinking not so much about what you've learned, but about how you learned it. These 6 stages provide an organized framework for fast and effective learning. But what do you actually do at each stage? Well, that's what my colleagues Malcolm Nicol and Jane Nicol are going to show you now with the aid of a studio audience of potential accelerated learners.
Welcome to Accelerated Learning. I'm Malcolm Nicol.
And I'm Jane Nicol.
Before you begin to learn anything, you need to get in the right state of mind for learning. That means that you have to have a belief in your own inherent ability to learn anything and to have fun, to find learning an enjoyable and fruitful experience. You really have to have that unerring belief. Let me give you a few examples of what I mean. You think of some of the most famous, most intelligent, most creative people in the world. Think of Walt Disney, for instance. Would you believe he was actually fired by a newspaper editor for lack of creative ideas? Einstein couldn't speak until he was 4, couldn't read until he was 7. And Beethoven, he was actually told by a music teacher that he was hopeless as a composer. And we all know what happened to those people.
What I'd like you to do now is think back to a time when you succeeded at something. It may be back in your childhood, it could have been in sport, it could have been in learning at school, something, a time when you felt so proud and people congratulated you, you were a success. Bring back those feelings. What were people saying to you? What were you feeling? What were you seeing? How did it make you stand tall and proud? Those are the feelings of success that you need to start learning with. You can learn, you can be successful because you've been successful before. This will really help to get you in the right frame of mind. And it helps you to feel better because the mind actually affects the body. So as you think these positive thoughts about your successful time, you'll actually find that you're standing or sitting a little bit straighter and that you're feeling much more ready for what we're going to do. Now, from the beliefs that you have, you actually can start by breathing very, very carefully. Your brain is only 4% of your body weight, but it actually requires 20% of the oxygen. So when you start learning, it's very important that you clear your mind and take some deep breaths to clear away all the stress and strain of the day. And again, if we'd like to sort of just join in here now, just 5 or 10 cycles of breathing in and feeling the oxygen getting into your lungs so that it can get to the brain to help you get ready to learn. And you go, breathe in gently, hold it for a couple of seconds and then out nice and gently. And again, in and you keep going, and as you're breathing out, you will feel the stress and the strain going. You will get your brain ready, nice and clear, and we should always employ this tactic before you start learning. It makes a break from what's been going on in the day, from all those things that buzz around in our heads. We're going to start learning now, so relaxed. This creates a very relaxed, focused frame of mind, which is the type of frame of mind you need to get on with learning and to do it in a very positive way.
Why are you learning anything? You have to know that before you start. you have to decide what we like to call WII-FM. You tune into radio station WII-FM. What's in it for me? What's the ultimate reward? What's the ultimate payback from the learning experience? Let me give you a few examples. Let's say, for instance, you were trying to learn a foreign language. Why do you want to learn French? Is it because you want to go on vacation to Paris and be able to go into a beautiful sidewalk cafe and order dinner and make sure that the steak comes back cooked the way you really want it? Or maybe it's a business expansion and you have a client that you can do business with in Mexico City. He doesn't speak English. Imagine how much to your advantage it will be if you can speak Spanish. So you need to have a clear vision of achieving that goal and what you're going to get out of it. Imagine yourself there in that sidewalk cafe, having ordered an exquisite dinner, having conversed fluently with the waiter. Picture yourself there. Imagine how good you will feel, how exalted you will feel. Just feel that elation. And the same if it happens to be a business negotiation. You're actually down there, sitting around the negotiating table in the boardroom. You've clinched the deal. You've shaken hands. You've impressed your client with your knowledge of his language. What a great courtesy. What a great business advantage. Now, on the way to getting there, you need to set yourself some goals. And you need to do things one step at a time. Because trying to learn a foreign language, for instance, seems like an immense task if you're sitting here today and you don't know a word of French or a word of Spanish. Try learning just 5 words a day. 5 words a day isn't very much, but over the course of an entire year, you could actually become very conversational in that particular language. Another important thing you can do for your motivation along the learning path is to actually reward yourself. When you do achieve one of those goals, pat yourself on the back. Give yourself a gold star. If you're going out to learn French and you achieve a certain level, take yourself out to a French dinner. Have a restaurant and practice your skills while you're there. Very, very important. Pat yourself on the back. We like to call it catch yourself doing it right. Another important thing is confidence, to build up your confidence levels. And I've talked already about learning a language, and it's a good example to continue with, because what you need to find at the beginning of any learning experience is what you already know. And you may not think you know any words of French or German or Spanish. You'll be amazed how much you do already know.
One good tip for learning is to summarize what you've learned as you progress. So let me recap what stage 1 was about. Essentially what Malcolm and Jane have said is that a little time spending preparing for learning makes a big difference later. Spending time to get focused and positive, motivated, psyched up if you like an athlete, is time very well spent. So, 1, think through exactly what this will do for you. 2, set a timetable and stick to it. 3, break the subject down into small chunks and celebrate each little victory. And 4, visualize really vividly what success will look like and feel like. You see, motivation isn't about grim determination. It's about making sure that you've programmed your subconscious mind to really want what you've set out to do. Okay, now let's look at stage 2, getting the facts to suit yourself.
So without any more ado, what we want to do right now is get you all speaking Japanese, counting for us very simply in 1 to 10 in Japanese. We'd like you to stand up just for a moment.
What we've done here is, you saw the Japanese characters before and you probably thought, how on earth are we going to count to 1 to 10 in Japanese? We've accelerated the process here. So we'll do them in pairs and build up as we go through, and if I'll take the lead, and if you'd like to follow, we start with 1 and 2, which are ichi, ni. So we scratch our knee. So it's ichi, ni. That's it. Come on, join in and say it, please. Ichi, ni. 3 and 4 are sun. We point to the sun. And she, we point to a lady. So we go from the top. Ichi, ni, sun, she. And again, ichi, ni, sun, she. 5 and 6 are go and rock. So for go, we just pretend to take a couple of paces forward, and for rock and roll, we can rock and roll. So we go from the top. Itchy, knee, sun, she, go, rock. Right, and again. Itchy, knee, sun, she, go, rock. 7 and 8. Now, 7 is shishi, so we do a double sneeze. So it's shishi, okay? Shishi. And 8 is hatshi, so we put on a hat and sneeze. So it's hatshi. Right, try those two. Shishi, hatshi. Okay, and again, she, hatchi. Remember the actions, it all helps to build the memory. So we start at the top with itchy, knee, sun, she, go, rock, she, hatchi. And again, itchy, knee, sun, she, go, rock, she, and hatchi. Great. And the last pair are 9 and 10, which is coo, like a dove, and ju, we put on the yarmulke, right? So it's coo and ju, okay? From the top. Itchy, knee, sun, she, go, rock, she, hatchi, coo, and ju. We will be coming back to this later on, and we'll see just how much you've remembered. Thank you very much. You sit down.
That was really excellent. Thank you very much. A very good participatory audience. It's got you all warmed up as well. But this is true multi-sensory learning. And when we first said to you, we're going to teach you how to count to 10 in Japanese, I could see expressions on your faces. You couldn't believe it. Perhaps now you can believe it. Jane?
One of the techniques that we use in accelerated learning for helping you to make sure that things are in your style is to actually get a big picture overview. When you're starting a subject, look at the whole thing, see where you're leading to, so that you can see how the parts build up and fit in. The next technique that we like to use is to actually break that big picture down into small steps, because again, just like goals in life, if you've got small steps along the way, you can reward yourself as you achieve them, you can calculate how you're progressing, you know you're moving towards your final destination. Now, there are many, many ways of learning, of getting input. It can be an audio tape program, it can be videos, television programs, lectures, books. No matter what input you use, to make sure that you're listening or watching very carefully, you should always be trying to ask questions of the person who wrote the program, who wrote the book, who's presenting. Because if you're always listening to ask the questions, to try and trip them up if you like, then you're listening well and you're making sure that you're concentrating, looking for the things that you need clarification on. And we recommend that you use the A, E, I, O, U that's on the board there, which are the vowels in the alphabet, to remember the type of questions you need to be asking. They are assumptions. You know, what assumptions are being made here? What evidence is there for the answers? What illustrates this point? Or what illustrations can I think of in my own work? What opinions or conclusions can I draw from what's being said? And basically, what's unique about this? What haven't I heard before? What can I do with this? So always be forming questions, asking the author, the writer, the presenter in your mind. You know, get your answers. You'll be very much listening well if you do that.
As Jane mentioned, as adults, there are 3 key ways that we take in information: visual, auditory, and physical. And I'd just like to ask you to consider for a moment how you best remember various events that happen. Let's say, for instance, that you're watching TV, or you're at the movies, or even reading a book. Do you, A, best remember what you see? Do you remember the scenes? Do you remember what people look like? Or B, do you remember the dialogue? Do you remember what people have to say? Do you remember people's names? Do you remember the jokes? Or C, Do you remember what happened? Do you remember how the characters felt? Do you remember how you felt watching them or reading about them? You are all unique individuals, and you all have preferences. And this is what multisensory learning is all about, is to help you recognize the ones that you have and to embrace the others as well for true multi-chance, multisensory learning. Jane?
We've seen a lot of techniques so far and mentioned a lot of techniques that actually refer to each of the senses. The visual people will certainly find techniques like highlighting. As you go through a textbook, don't be afraid to highlight, because we've all been brought up to respect books, but basically they need to work for you, and you should be involved in what you're learning. Go through, highlight the text as you find new information, underline it. Those sort of things will be very helpful for the visual people. You can also use mental imagery and visualization to put yourself in a situation where you're using your learning. That's a very visual technique. You can watch demonstrations. You maybe need to see somebody doing something before it really makes sense to you. And also the mapping technique that we'll be showing you in a little while, like the maps that we're using here, would very much be a visual technique where you can see what we're talking about. For people who are more auditory, they don't need necessarily to take so many notes, because that's their way of learning. They take the information in an auditory style. And things like audio tapes, even reading into an audio tape themselves to help revise, that would certainly help. They appreciate the sound of the voice. You can use tone and even use crazy accents to make things stand out more when you're taping your own revision. Reading out loud is definitely helpful for somebody who's auditory, and obviously lectures are ideal for them. For the physical learners, they really need hands-on. They need to actually be doing things to make sense to them. So again, actually taking part in a demonstration or taking part in role play would certainly be an advantage for them.
What we're going to do now is actually show you how to read through a textbook in a very powerful way, so that you can absorb information and comprehend information even while taking it in at a pretty fast rate. Jane?
We're using the imaginary example of a 250-page book. You know, a lot of us get these books and we know we need to find the information. But in this day and age, it's where do you find the time to actually wade through, learn it, and get anything useful out of it. So we're going to look at, say, a 250-page book that's divided into 10 chapters. Now, using techniques that we've already spoken about in this